Good morning, Year 5s, and welcome to your grammar lesson for today. I hope that you've had a really good day of learning so far and that you're ready to tackle some revision of punctuation. We're going to be just going over a few concepts that we've been learning about over the last couple of weeks and then seeing if we can apply that to our activity on Teams. All right, so our learning objective today is to be going through some of that punctuation and then making sure that we can apply it to some questions. So let's first have a quick recap of all the different concepts we've been learning about in Year 5 this year, and then making sure that we remember them to apply them to our activity. So we get 4 types of sentences. We get statement, command, questions, and exclamations. Now, if you see a statement, it will end with a full stop. So if you're looking for a statement sentence, it'll be a sentence that's just generally like an ordinary sentence, and it ends with a full stop. For example, there it says rainbows have 7 colors. They are beautiful to look at. Those are just simple statements, and you can see that they end on a full stop. A command is when you're telling someone or something to do something, okay? So you're commanding them, and that's sort of like a key word there. If you're commanding them to do something, and they could either end with an exclamation mark or a full stop. So if we have a look there, it says, help me. All right, that is, you're asking somebody, you're commanding them to help you, and those generally end with an exclamation mark. And if you think about how you would speak, if you've got a lot of expression that you're saying it with, you would end with an exclamation mark. You wouldn't be whispering, help me. You'd be shouting at the top of your voice if you needed help, okay? And please stop doing that, which could end with a full stop. So commands are sentences that tell you to do something, and they've generally got this urgent or even anger that could be in it, and generally very short sentences as well that either end with an exclamation mark or a full stop. Questions obviously are sentences that ask you something, and they will end with a question mark. So what did you have for dinner? And we have a question mark at the end of that sentence. And our last one is exclamations, and they are generally sentences that begin with what or how, and it is a full sentence which includes a verb and it ends with an exclamation mark. And we generally use with a lot of we say with a lot of emphasis these words. So what a dangerous mountain to climb. Okay, you would be saying that with quite a lot of enthusiasm in your voice. There'd be a lot of emotion almost, and they would end with an exclamation mark. What amazing children they are, and how kind of him to do that. Those all are sentences that end with an exclamation mark because they've generally got some sort of emotive language in them, embedded in them. Right, so those are the 4 types of sentences you get and the punctuation that follows with them. So statements have a full stop, commands have an exclamation or a full stop, questions have a question mark, and exclamations have an exclamation mark, okay? So you will see something like that in today's activities, so make sure that you're using the correct punctuation. Right, when we're looking at commas, we get different types of sentences that we use commas in. And the most common one that we have is when we have a list of items. So when we are listing a number of things, we will then put commas in between. So for example, Jenna bought some apples, comma, grapes, comma, bananas and pears for her fruit salad. So you can see there's a list of items there and a list of fruit in this an example of a sentence. And you can see that they are separated by a comma. And just a reminder, we don't put a comma before the and, okay? We leave that blank. We could also have it to separate our subordinate clauses from a main clause at the start of a sentence. Although she was tired would be our subordinate clause. It cannot stand on its own. It is not a full sentence. Tilly went to the party, which would be our main clause, okay? So there you can see our subordinate clause is the groups of words at the beginning there. Although she was tired, then I have my comma, and then I would have my main clause following it. And many of you will know the last one is when we are having a fronted adverbial, and we will then put a comma after the fronted adverbial. So after the party, every night, on a Sunday, comma, Greta excitedly opened her presents. So we put our comma after our fronted adverbial. And the very last one there is our relative clause, which we've also been exposed to over the last couple of weeks, that's when we add extra information to a sentence. All right, and remember those relative clause, we can take those words out and my sentence will still read the same. I'm adding extra information. So it says the children, comma, who were in class 6, comma, were very excited, right? I can take out that relative clause, which is who were in class 6. Okay, the words between the commas, I can take this out and I can still have a sentence, the children were very excited. Makes perfect sense on its own. And I've added in this relative clause here, which is extra information. Where I've added in that extra information, I put my 2 commas to separate those 2 parts. So then I have the children who were in class 6, and that relative clause is giving me more information about the children. So that is when we use commas. So there's quite a few ways that we can use a comma, and we must make sure that we're using the comma correctly. Okay, often when we're writing, this is when we will find we'll be using the comma when we're using our front adverbials or our relative clauses, and that's making sure that we use those commas correctly. Right, then we're looking at parenthesis and particularly brackets, okay? And brackets also add extra information, and I can actually, again, take that information out. It doesn't have to be in the sentence, and then the sentence must still make sense. So again, I'm adding extra information. So there, for example, it says Mount Everest, and then in brackets, I'm giving the height, which is 8,828 meters, is the highest mountain in the world. If I take out those brackets, my sentence will still read the same and make sense. Mount Everest is the highest mountain in the world. That on itself makes sense. If I add the brackets in, it gives me extra information about Mount Everest, about how high it is, and I put that extra information into brackets, okay? So there you can see where it says brackets are used to separate off information that isn't essential. It means it doesn't need to be there, but we're adding extra information to the meaning of the rest of the sentence. And here's another one. Robin's hair, which was red, was the longest in the class. And this is actually also what we could use as a relative clause. And instead of the brackets, we would put commas. Okay, so we can see there how it can be adapted. Right, so remember it's giving extra information, which means if I'm checking my answer to see if I put the brackets in correctly, I can take out those words in my sentence and I can read, Robin's hair was the longest in the class. That on its own makes perfect sense. I've taken out the words that are in the brackets. My sentence can still read the same. And where I put those brackets in, I'm adding extra information. So when you are checking if you've put the brackets in the correct place, make sure that you read over and take out what you've put in brackets. And then you can see and check if your sentence makes sense without those words. Dashes are also used to break our sentences halfway between them with and usually in more informal writing, okay? So again, we're getting, we can look at here where it says a sharp break between 2 main clauses. The film was very informative. I learned a great deal. Okay, those on itself are main clauses. However, I can put a dash there and that will give me information that I'm adding there. So I can separate the 2 clauses. I can also give extra information, which is embedded in the sentence, okay? And so it says playing in grandma's garden, which is huge, is always good fun. So again here, remember we can also, this also could be a relative clause, which means I could just put commas instead of the dashes. Okay, so it's another way in which we can add extra information. And I could read this back, playing in grandma's garden is always fun, on its own makes sense. And if I take out those words between the dashes, I can still read it and it makes perfect sense. Okay, here's some more examples. One thing's for sure, he doesn't want to go. It's almost like when you're reading it as well, it's almost like when you take a natural pause. One thing's for sure, he doesn't want to go. Okay, if you are reading that, and especially if you've been doing lots of reading at home and you're practicing every day and you're reading your books, and you will naturally make a pause almost in that sentence, and that's where we have the dash. A toad's skin is dry and bumpy, not like the frog's smooth, wet skin. Okay, so remember, it's got to also make sense, those dashes, the main clauses, if you're separating main clauses. So those are words that can stand on their own. Hyphens, we talk about hyphenated words. We've looked at these before, and that's when we link words or parts of words, and it's different from a dash because you do not leave a space between a hyphen and the words in the sentence. Okay, so for example here, you can see here there's no space between mother, in, and law. Okay, these hyphens are very close together, and it's when we take 2 separate words and we're creating almost like one word, but you're using the dashes in between. Okay, It is used to show that a word continues on the next line. So often when you're writing and you get to the end and you can't fit in your word, you can then break it up into its syllables, which is where you would naturally clap it out. So slowly, and then you would put your hyphen there to show that that slowly is actually one word, but you can't fit it on a line. So you'd break it up, you'd put the hyphen there to say, to show your reader they actually need to carry on with that word, that is actually one word, but you've broken it up because you can't fit it on the line. It has also linked separate words into one new word. So mother-in-law is now what sort of seen as one word, but we have these hyphens connecting them, okay? So that's a hyphenated word. We've often looked at hyphenated words. In fact, there was a hyphenated word in your English model text, which you would have read yesterday if you did your English. Semicolons, we've also seen this and we've learned about this in our English writing, and they are used to separate two main clauses that are closely related to each other, but they can also stand on their own as sentences. For example, I have a big test tomorrow, I can't go out tonight. Okay, again, you can hear that you almost naturally take a pause when you read that, and you can see there that I have those two main clauses. I have a big test tomorrow, I can't go out tonight. They are two separate sentences on their own, they make sense, and therefore I have a semicolon in between, okay? And it's just linking the idea, all right? So the idea needs to link. So the reason why you can't go out tonight is because you have a big test tomorrow. So you're linking those two ideas together using your semicolon. I've just had a big meal, however, I am hungry again. Again, there you can see that I'm linking those two ideas, okay? I've just had a big meal, and then however I'm hungry again. You wouldn't say however I want to go buy a car, because having a big meal and buying a car do not link together. They have to link, the ideas have to link, and we would then use a semicolon to separate those ideas. Then we've also seen colons before. Now colons are used at the end of a clause to show an answer or elaboration or an explanation. For example, I would like the following. So if we're introducing like a list, which we did before, we did this in English last term. If we're introducing a list like milk, cheese, and butter, I would have a colon there, okay? And that would introduce my list. Or I have two hobbies, reading and running. Again, I'm introducing and elaborating on my two hobbies that I have, which is reading and running. So there I put my colon to introduce those two concepts. So there is colons. And the last one we're going to be looking at inverted commas, and that is, inverted commas is when we use it in direct speech, and that is when somebody is speaking, all right? So we have to make sure that we're using our inverted commas correctly, and we're using all the punctuation that comes with direct speech. So there's quite a bit that we need to go over. So we're going to go through it together, and then hope this will jog your memory. Right. So when you see any of the words that are spoken, that is where we use these inverted commas. These are sort of like upside down commas, okay? And we then put them for where the words are speaking. So here I say stop, I said. So the words that are coming out of my mouth is the word stop, all right? So we put our inverted commas to show that that is the word that is being spoken. That is the actual word coming out of my mouth. And then if I have a new speaker, we often start with a new line. For example, how are you doing today? Asked Henry. I'm great, said Ashton. So when we are doing direct speech and we're having a conversation with somebody, every time somebody new speaks, you would then start a new line. So there you can see how are you doing today? Asked Henry would be one sentence. And then on the next line, I'm great, said Ashton, because we're now introducing another speaker. We must always remember there's a capital letter, which is the very first word that is spoken, okay? So what an amazing day. What would have a capital W because it is the first letter after we open those inverted commas. So as soon as we open the inverted commas, that first letter must be capitalized, right? And different names, inverted commas, are also called speech marks or quotation marks. You might also hear some of those terms being used. Commas, we must remember to add our commas. So here you can see Ashton whispered, comma, and that's when we almost take that pause. All right, remember a comma is there to take that pause, that breath. Ashton whispered, be quiet. And then if it's at the beginning, where we speak at the beginning, we would say goodbye, comma, close my inverted commas. Remember, that's very important that we put the punctuation before we close the inverted commas, and then whoever spoke, said Jules. And then make sure your speech is correctly punctuated. There are times I feel that you are a little cold, I said. So there, let's have a look at this whole thing. You can see there, I have my words that are being spoken at the beginning. My capital letter comes as my first letter after I've opened the inverted commas, because these are the words that are being spoken. So I put my inverted commas around the words that are being spoken. I'm not going to put the inverted commas around I said, because I'm not saying those words. Those are the words that are not coming out of my mouth. And then I have my comma and then close the inverted commas. I taught my class that inverted commas are like a hug. They hug all the punctuation, like the capital letter, and then I have to put some sort of punctuation before I close my inverted commas. Right, so let's have a practice together. I have given you just a few quick ones, just so that you can just make sure that you're happy with it. And then you are going to go and do it on Teams. So we're going to do them together, all right? So this is, the first one is tick one box to show the correct place for a colon. Now remember, a colon looks like this. And we're going to be looking at this sentence and we're going to decide which block I would decide where it's going to go. So Tom needed to think carefully about his homework. It looked very difficult. Okay, where do you think you would put that colon? Now I want you to just ignore these boxes, because these boxes, when I cut them and pasted them, they went a bit funny. So I'm just going to take these boxes out very quickly so you don't get confused. And I would like you to see if you can find, just quickly get this, if you can find where you think we would put the colon. So don't worry about those boxes. Have a think about where we're going to put this colon. Tom needed to think carefully about his homework. It looked very difficult. So where do you think? And I'll give you a few seconds to have a think about where you would put it in. All right, you don't have to write anything down. You can just have a look at your screen and decide in your head where I'm going to put that colon. Where would I put that punctuation? Thinking about that colon would separate our two clauses, two main clauses. Right, so I am going to first read this. Tom needed to think carefully about his homework, and I almost naturally take a pause here. Okay, that is my first main clause. Tom needed to think carefully about his homework. That on its own makes sense. It looked very difficult, so therefore I would put my colon in between those two words, because I can have Tom needed to think carefully about his homework. That makes perfect sense on its own. It looked very difficult, explaining why his homework, why he was thinking very carefully. So it was giving us that extra information, and it can also stand on its own. It looked very difficult. Okay, so my colon would go there. Right, question number 2 is which sentence, now this is where we looked at those sentences, which sentence would need a question mark? So which one of those sentences would be a question sentence? Okay, so you can have a read of, there's 4 options here, and I will give you a few seconds to have a go through them, read them, and decide which one would you tick. Remember, you don't have to write anything down on a piece of paper. You can just look at it and you can just in your head say, right, it'll be this one. So have a go at doing that one in your head now. Okay, a good thing to do is when we're saying these words is that we actually imagine that we're speaking them. And if I can answer it, it means it would have a question mark. So what happened that day might never be known. Does that need an answer? No. What really happened that day? Right, maybe. Someone must know what really happened that day. I'd like to know what happened that day. So first of all, we got to think about a question word. And those are the who, what, where, how, when, which. So first of all, these are not question words. So they are not going to be standing out to me. So I've got what happened that day might never be known. What really happened that day. And I would select this one because this first one on its own, I don't need to answer. Okay, it's just more like it's a statement. What happened that day might never be known. Okay, it's more like a statement that they're saying. So my question mark that I would need to place would go in this sentence. What really happened that day? And if I was asking you, I could say like, Harry, what really happened that day? And Harry would need to give me an answer because I'm asking him a question. Right, let's have a look at these 4 sentences here and decide which of them are a question. So would they require a question mark at the end? And if so, which ones can you identify? Which ones of those are the question sentences and which ones are the commands? Remember, the command is telling you that you need to do something. Okay, so have a think about those 4 and in your head decide which one of those you would choose. Would it be a question or a command? Right, if you need some more time, you can just pause the video and then you can come back when you've finished going through it. Do try and do them in your head, and this is going to help you for when you do your activity on Teams. So the first one says, do your stretches before you exercise. That would be commanding me to do something. It's telling me to do something. I must do my exercises before I exercise. Very important to warm up my muscles. Do you prefer tennis or cricket? And if you can answer that, I could say, Amir, do you prefer tennis or cricket? He would answer, and so therefore it would be a question. Do the boys always go running in the morning? And I could say, Sam, do the boys always go running in the morning? I would need an answer, so it would be a question. And do take some water with you to football practice. I'd be telling you to do something. So if I'm telling you to do something, I'm commanding you to do it. Right, question number 4, it says insert a pair of brackets. So I'm just going to put brackets in the correct place in the sentence below. Remember, brackets give me more information about something and I can take that information out. So it says the highest mountain in Great Britain is Ben Nevis, which is 1,344 meters in Scotland. So where would I put the brackets? See if you can have a go. Super, so hopefully you would have put your brackets here because remember, I can take this information out. It's just extra information. So this is extra information about how high the mountain is in Scotland. And therefore I can take that information out. So my brackets would go around the meters. Insert 1 comma. Also, a big tip here is to make sure you're reading your questions carefully, okay? Because often they try and trick you out because you don't read it carefully, all right? So make sure that you're reading the questions carefully. For example, here it says insert 1 comma, not 2 commas, but 1 comma. Every night, Dad and my brother take the dog for a walk. See if you can figure out where you would put that comma and why would you put that comma there. Great, and hopefully you realize that every night is a fronted adverbial and it is giving us more information about how often something is happening. And in this case, how often they take the dog for a walk. And so every night is our fronted adverbial, and after a fronted adverbial, I need a comma. Right, I'm going to put my semicolon in the correct place in the sentence. Come and see me tomorrow. I will not have time to see you today. See if you can think about where you'd put that semicolon. Right, and you would put it here. Again, remember, it's separating those clauses. So come and see me tomorrow. I will not have time to see you today. Okay, you can hear when you say it out loud, and even if you have to say out your sentences today out aloud, it will really help you to break those clauses up. And the last one is question number 7. We're going to put 2 hyphens. Again, there I'm going to read my questions very carefully. I'm going to put 2 now in the correct place. So I want a hyphenated word. I'm going to take 2 words and I'm going to create a hyphenated word, putting a little hyphen between those 2 words. See if you can find those 2 words that you would want to put together. So we have the children have been busy cooking some healthy sugar-free snacks and learning some well-known traditional songs for visitors to enjoy. Right, and sugar-free is going to be our hyphenated word, and well-known, and already there the computer has picked up that there was an error because it's underlined it. So well known also needs to have a hyphenated to become sort of like a shorter word itself. So now hopefully that's helped jog your memory with all that punctuation that we've been learning about over the last couple of weeks. And a lot of this is just revision for you. In fact, there's nothing new here. We've been looking at it in English. We've been looking at it in grammar. And so hopefully this has just jogged your memory. I know we've had a nice little break, our half term, and our minds are a little bit relaxed at the moment. So getting back into gear and making sure that we are remembering and retaining this information. So you can log on to Teams now and you can complete your grammar activity for today. I really hope that you enjoy it and you really think about your answers. You are given the question and you have to answer it in the block beside it. So hopefully that helps you. And you just read the question very carefully and enjoy. So have a wonderful day of learning, and I will see you back here later.